Oh my gosh, we're back. We're back. Valiant. TLDR. Tonight is the Valiant night, guys. If there's one cast that's going to bring you all Valiant, it's going to be tonight. I'm excited, guys. How are you guys feeling?
Great.
Oh, been pumped all day.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this, guys. So everyone who's tuning in today, thank you for tuning in. I'm Carl Choi, co-founder and publisher of 24/7 Comics, and I have my co-host, Southern Comic Geek, and Noel Stingray.
Like that's my last name. You might as well be at this point, right?
So how this whole thing got started was, SCG and I, we hung out at Heroes Con last year. That was kind of like our first meeting. And Baltimore Comic Con is when we really hung out. And during that time, we all went to Hard Rock Cafe, and Newell, got stuck between us as we were just geeking out about our love for Valiant.
But I was enjoying it.
Oh man! And so what happened was, when SCG and I started doing this cast, Newell will be a regular attendee in the chat, and then after a while, he was like, "Man, I'm curious about Valiant," and then he started reading Valiant too. And so, man, it's been like 6 months, guys. I mean, we've covered IXO, we've covered Shadow Man, we've covered Harbinger. We're about to get
a little bit of Rye.
Yeah. Wow, it's been a journey, guys. I mean, so kind of before I kind of just jump right into it and introduce our guest tonight, SCG, Newell, like, you guys want to share a little bit about what this person means to you?
Well, I mean, Bob's a legend. Everybody knows who Bob Layton is, right? And, knowing, like, I didn't know that he was a part of Valiant, obviously, until I started reading this stuff with you guys. So it's pretty cool that we're going to get to hear a little bit of the history behind it and, how he got into that. So I think it's going to be pretty awesome.
And you, SCG?
Yeah, I mean, obviously everybody talks about his Iron Man, Demon in a Bottle run and all that kind of stuff, which is legendary. But, he was there at the founding of Valiant Comics and had a lot to do with not only the creative direction art-wise, but also writing-wise for a lot of these characters. So being able to talk with him, actually meet him at OAX this year. Of course, there's a little story behind that. I don't know if we'll share it or not, but we got to meet him at OAX and to be able to get together and talk about his time in the comic book industry is going to be fantastic, I think.
Yeah,
I agree. He's such great energy, and I want to have that energy as I mature in life, because it's so rare to find some positivity, just a Bob energy, just so engaging. But before we bring our special guest on today, let's say hi to the audience. Rolly Simeon, hello. What's up, homie? Legion of Comics, #1 Marvel fan. You will be #1 Valiant fan soon enough. And Mr. Tom,
the more you say that, the more it sounds like a threat.
Our good friend. And Mr. Tom McDonald, we welcome all questions tonight. So we're not going to ask all the questions. We're going to welcome the chat to bring it tonight as well. It's a very rare occasion, and Bob said this is one of his first ones, in a long time. So with that said, let me get a little bit into who he is. So I like to go to the internet and go with the latest tools to find the most elaborate information. So I asked ChatGPT to give me the best file on Mr. Bob Layton himself. So here's what it is. Few creators have left an indelible mark on the comic book industry, quite like Bob Layton. A visionary writer, artist, editor, Bob revolutionized Iron Man, co-founded Valiant Comics, and helped shape some of the most beloved characters and stories in modern comics today. With a career spanning over 5 decades, his influence can be felt in every corner of the industry, from rise of independent comics to the very DNA of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Whether it's his iconic work on Iron Man, the creation of IXO Man of War, or legendary collaborations with Jim Shooter, Bob has continually redefined what's possible in comics. Tonight, we dive deep into his journey, from his early days breaking into industry to his groundbreaking work at Valiant and beyond. Please welcome the legendary, one and only, Bob Layton.
That was ChatGPT, really?
Oh, pretty good, right?
I should hire that ChatGPT as my agent.
Yep. You gotta hire ChatGPT. So, Bob, how are you feeling today, man? Good morning in America.
I I say Nocio and out to all you out there in the comic land. It's Tuesday morning here. So as you know, so I live in the future now. I'm in Seoul, South Korea. I'm still on my first coffee. So bear with me as my brain, comes back to life here.
It's really funny. In fact, I reached out to Bob last November when I was heading to Korea for 2 weeks, and we literally were passing each other on the plane because it turned out you were going back to Florida for a wedding for the same 2 weeks I was in Korea.
Yeah, my youngest grandson was getting married. Yeah.
Oh my gosh! Hope that wedding was amazing because man, like...
It was, it is what it is. You're obligated to go, but I knew 6 people. There was like 200 people at the wedding. I knew 6 of them. And I helped birth one of them. So it's like, it is what it is. Hey, number 1 Marvel fan, how you doing, man? He follows. He's a regular on the CAF show.
Oh,
how
yeah,
you doing, bro? Yeah,
that's our friend Tom.
Thanks for jumping ship and coming over here.
I think he's trying to watch both shows tonight.
Well,
are we competing with another show tonight? What's going on?
I think they're doing
because I do a podcast on. I do the CAF live, but I do when I was there, I do a thing called "Where in the World is Bob Layton," where they follow me around the world when I'm traveling.
Yeah, we love that.
There's like 50 episodes on YouTube for any of you people who want to see it. It's started with me leaving in April of 2023, and I've been traveling ever since. So whenever I go to a new country, I do a new episode.
Yeah, we love it.
It's been fun.
We'll get there. We'll get to today, but what we're gonna do is some time traveling today. So get ready, Bob. We're gonna take us back to the beginning. It's story time.
Mr. Peabody, let's get in the Wayback Machine.
Here we go. I'm gonna kick it off, and then Newell, Jason chime in. I'm gonna just start with this question. What was your very first memory of putting pencil to paper as an artist?
I know my mom used to take me to church, and like I said, I probably was like 5 or 6 years old, and I would draw the Fantastic Four fighting each other in the borders of the program for the. I would draw little cartoons around the border of the thing, shows where my religious affiliation was with Stan Lee, obviously. I remember doing that, but I learned to read off comics when I was like 5 years old. My sister, I could tell what was happening in the comic. The storytelling was so good back then. And, I wanted to know what was in the balloons. And so I forced my sister Sue to teach me how to read. And so I started school. They skipped me a grade because I was already reading proficiently. And which I don't recommend, by the way, because graduating at 17 in the early 1970s is really crappy because you can't get a job or anything, But it was like the power of the medium really hit me hard then at that point. So I never had a fireman or policeman stage. I wanted to be a storyteller, So
that's awesome.
Those little church pamphlets was the start of it, and then I would make my own comics. Funny enough, I tell this story all the time. I hated Iron Man as a kid. I thought it was awful.
Oh no.
No, and it was awful. If you go back and read those early, because Stan never wrote it. It was his brother Larry, who was not Stan Lee. And no offense to Larry. But, and I know they're terrible because I had to go back and read them all when I did the foreword to the omnibus for Tales of Suspense. That was painful. But I used to do my own little Iron Man comics. And one of them that I drew on notebook paper, blue line notebook paper, was Doom Quest.
Oh, nice.
Because I never thought, why isn't Dr. Doom Iron Man's, arch enemy? They are literally two sides of the same coin, And I drew a little because I loved King Arthur and Knights of the Round Table, and I drew my own little comic, Iron Man comic. So it was Providence that eventually I wound up there because I already had my own ideas of what the book should have been about. So yeah, that was 11 years old, man.
Wow.
But as you know, I got out of high school and I started publishing fanzines. And that's where I met Roger Stern and John Byrne, and we put out this little digest thing called CPL. And that's how we got noticed by the industry. That was the early 70s.
And when you were putting those out, were you guys going from comic shop, and like just passing it out by hand?
No. What I've always been very entrepreneurial, so what I did was I made a deal before the direct market. The two main distributors of comics outside of mainstream, the mafia that distributed it to newsstands, was Phil Suling and Bud Plant. So I met with Phil and Bud at a convention and made a deal with them for them to buy my entire print run and let them distribute it.
Oh wow!
So so I would put out an issue of CPL. I'd do about 5,000 copies, split the print run between Bud and Phil, and they would sell it. But every issue, I sent 25 copies to Marvel and DC, just hoping somebody would pick it up and read it. So yeah, and eventually it evolved into a career. I got word through a mutual friend that Wally Wood saw some of my art and said if I was ever on the East Coast, that he would take me on as his apprentice. Oh wow! So with $200 in my pocket and an old beat up station wagon, I drove from Indiana to. At 19 years old, I drove from Indiana to Derby, Connecticut, where Woody was living, and I started my apprenticeship there.
Wow! And was he surprised? Like how serious was he? Like,
well, no, Woody was Woody. I mean, I could get into it for hours about Woody, but the apprenticeship only lasted about 9 months because Woody and I got, because I was still publishing fanzines while I was working as a background assistant. He was inking All-Star Comics, and I think Hercules Unbound at DC. And I was working doing the backgrounds on that. Excuse me. What happened was I was still publishing fanzines, and Woody talked me into doing an issue of Wits End. So I did the 10th issue of Wits End with him. And then we also did a second issue of Heroes Inc., which is a book he published like back in the 60s or whatever. Excuse me. And then he came to me one day and said he wanted to do porno comics. and I'm like, Woody, I can't really do that. I mean, I'm just starting my career. I don't really want to be pinned as a pornographer.
Is pre-Comics Code or after Comics Code?
No, I mean, this was 1975, 1976. And I go, Woody, I really don't want to do that, And the next day I showed up at the studio and there was no work for me. And Woody had this little shit list of all the people in comics that pissed him off. And it was like a who's who, from Neil Adams and, Al Williams. And it's like my name had been added to the bottom of the list. So he retired soon after. He did the porno comics, by the way, which were awful. But that's what Dick Giordano took me on as his apprentice, and so I went to work for Dick. And so I worked for Dickie, and he was my mentor through my entire career, including Valiant, which I got some interesting Dick Giordano behind-the-scenes stories about Valiant too. But he was my mentor right up to the day he died. I was with him at his deathbed, as a matter of fact. So he was the closest thing I ever had to a father. So. I did well. I mean, you think about it. I had two, absolute legends as my mentors, starting out. So, I had some advantages, without a doubt.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Any Iron Man questions?
We'll dive in. I mean, with Dick, did he give you your first job as well? And was that
no? Actually, Woody did. Well, strangely enough, Woody did. Woody, and this is what I want to say because Woody was kind of, Woody had substance abuse problems his entire career, off and on. Right, he was struggling. He had health problems, but so I wound up on his shit list. But at the same time, when he decided to leave DC and go do his stuff, he recommended that I take over his books, which was always to this day has puzzled the shit out of me because it's like. Well, he must have deep down liked me, even though he was angry with me. So I wound up taking over All Star Comics, you know. So Joe Staten became the penciler, and you know that was my first regular book.
Nice.
So go figure, you know. So that's what happens. It's a confusing business.
There you go.
Yeah. So Tom said he's a huge fan of you inking Joe Staten on All Star Justice League in the 70s. Joe never looked better. Would love.
Oh, Joe didn't believe that, though. Joe hated my stuff, you know, because I kept kind of trying to fix it, make it look less cartoony, and he didn't like that apparently. You know,
interesting.
Yeah. So, yeah, we eventually came to loggerheads with that, and as I've said, so much of comics. I was saying in the green room, so much of comics is political, you know, and that particular case. Staten lobbied to have me taken off the book, so I did. You know, I left. You know, the one rule that I've had through my entire career, and that includes Valiant, right, is that this is great fun. You know, to work on these iconic characters and be, you know, create their part of their lexicon and all that kind of stuff. And the second it stops being fun, it's time to move on. You know, because the money wasn't there. I was getting paid like $20 a page to ink that stuff. You know, the grief, they didn't pay me any extra for the grief. So, you know, you had to live in the tri-state area. You know, you had to live in New York or whatever. They didn't have FedEx or the internet or anything like that. So you had to deliver stuff directly. And that's kind of how I got my foot in the door at Marvel, because I would volunteer even with Woody and with Dickie to deliver their stuff to the companies if they weren't going in. So I could go in and meet with the art director and hand them stuff myself. That's kind of how I got my foot in the door.
That's actually my next question. I mean, obviously, like today we're all in different, 4 different places across the world. And
I'm in a different time.
Yeah, right. You're in time altogether. You're in the future, right?
I'm in future, now, yes.
Work has changed completely. I mean, you're taking commissions from Korea and delivering them in Florida, and then having them shipped back from New York.
Well,
I mean,
I still
it's
do
everywhere, right? Yeah,
and
but bring us back in time. Like when you said you were delivering the pages to Marvel, like what was the work environment like? What was the office like? What was like a 9 to 5 day like for Bob Layton working on Marvel?
It wasn't. No cartoonist has a 9 to 5 day per se. Okay, no freelancer. But for me, it was an opportunity to, like I said, get inside the door, because like at DC was a very structured environment there. You went in. If I had pages from Woody or Dickie, I would go in, sit in the lobby until somebody came out and got me, and then they would escort me to their office. I didn't get to hang out there. They would count the pages. They would hand me the check or whatever, and escort me out. That was the way DC was run back then. Very sterile, very corporate kind of,
No fun.
And then you go to Marvel and you can just hear boom boxes blasting or whatever, and they just let you in. And there, there's graffiti on the walls and people rollerblading down the hallways and stuff like that. It was just, and every editor's office was like a buzz with people going on. So that's why I kind of gravitated toward Marvel, because it was more like a fun time. It was less corporate or whatever. Mm-hmm. Although, like I said, Marvel would tend to screw up a lot more than DC, because at least in the corporate environment, they got your checks to you on time and so forth and so on. But yeah, it was the first time I went to DC. Vinny Coletta was the art director there, and I go into his office, and he's almost naked. He's stripped down to just he's barefoot, no shirt on. He's got the gold chains and everything, and barefoot, and he's sitting behind his desk drawing. And I'm kind of like, okay, this is odd.
Wow,
it's like,
they made them comfortable, huh? Everyone was comfortable.
Yeah, I'm showing my samples to a half-naked Italian. It's like, okay, this is weird. But I had established a good rapport with Vinny. I mean, it was fine. He liked me. he loved the fact that I was this nice kid from the Midwest or whatever. To him, it was just like he I think he had an urge to corrupt me as much as he possibly can.
Wow, that's so cool. So DC was definitely more the corporate setting, and then Marvel is kind of like the rock star creative.
Yeah, it was definitely a party going. Well, the energy was just there because I think they encouraged the interaction between artists. Anytime you have a group of artists together, this is one of the things in my head when I started formulating what to do with Valiant, with the bullpen at Valiant. Was it's like that was a much more creative atmosphere when artists can compare notes and sit and talk with each other. And I remember going in like in the early 80s or whatever, right, a Marvel, and on a Friday was payday, right? So it was a who's who in the bullpen of you'd be sitting there. There's Frank Miller, there's Walt Simonson, there's Bill Sienkiewicz, there's Chris Claremont, there's John Byrne. And it's like everybody's kind of like they're bringing in their whatever work they did for the week, and everybody's kind of passing pages around and looking what the other guy did and all this sort of stuff. Wow. So there was always an interaction there, people comparing notes and asking questions, and or just taking a poke at each other. But it was that creative sort of interaction was one of the things that got me to formulate the whole Nabro thing when I got to Valiant. I wanted to recreate that. And both Dick and Vinny all came out of this, and Woody for that matter, came out of the studio system in the 50s. And in the 50s, they had artist studios, and those studios would package books for companies. They would have groups of artists working on a single issue. One guy would do trees, one guy would do cars, whatever, like that, And the main
like manga's like that too, right? It's all
they that's the old studio system was how they all came up, and I tried to recreate that when I got to Valiant, So it was always a mixture. In those days, it was a mixture of seasoned professionals and talented amateurs. So that's kind of one of the things that I had in my head when we started the whole Valiant thing up.
Okay. And we're going to spend most of our time today on Valiant. But before we go there, I want to kind of list off some of the accomplishments and the comics that you touched while you were at Marvel. And then I have a question as a follow-up. So Iron Man.
ChatGPT?
Yeah, ChatGPT again. Exactly. Jeez. Iron Man number 116 to 157, 1978 to 1980.
ChatGPT was wrong. I only did the covers up to 157. I stopped at 153.
Oh, okay.
You can't trust ChatGPT.
I know, can't chat. So I'll go
technically it was right because I did the covers for a few issues afterwards. But I went on to do Hercules after that.
Hercules, Incredible Hulk, Power Man, Iron Fist, Marvel graphic novel, X Factor, Marvel's first official movie adaptation, Indiana Jones and Return of the Jedi, and Last Star Wars. That's not you. Okay. No. Okay, cool. So of all those titles, like what's one of the most memorable stories you could share with us?
Obviously Demon in a Bottle. That was groundbreaking, Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it's one of those things that still resonates even here in Korea. All right. Wow. It still resonates to this day. It's like through that, that particular thing where we actually dealt with a serious real world thing. At the time, there wasn't the internet, but Marvel was stunned when bags of mail came in. And some of the letters would just, tear your heart out. They were like, I thought my dad was a bad guy until I read this and I realized that he's got a disease and blah, blah, blah. And to this day, I've been the unofficial spokesperson for sobriety in the comic industry. I get letters and emails all the time from fans who are struggling or whatever like that. And I've been very open about my own, recovery. And so it's like, it's one of those things where, obviously you can't set out to make history. You guys decide what's history, not me, right? but anytime you can do something like that, that's a big accomplishment.
Oh,
you know, I mean, yeah, you know, and I changed that character forever, you know. So yeah, that's I have to put that right up there.
So
Makes
what
sense.
inspired it? Like what inspired you to you know, to kind of deliver that so authentically?
Well, when Michelini and I sat down to retool Iron Man, because you know we kind of read the issues that came before us and realized it was a hot mess. And what, you know, David had never read any Marvel comics. He was a DC guy, which was really to our advantage because he had no preconceived notions about Tony Stark. So he really fed off of what I thought he should be. Because you know, I always thought as a kid being Tony Stark was cooler than being Iron Man. You know, and I said, you know, the thing of it is, you know, like most of the tropes, I mean, he was only a billionaire playboy, so he could basically afford to build the armor and fly around in it, right? And fight crime and whatever, you know. And it's like, and I really, everything needs a hook, you know. I mean, you think of Spider-Man. What's Spider-Man's hook? Well, he's a teenager pretending to be an adult, right? Yeah. You know, going out and being Spider-Man. Then the rest of the time, he's a teenager who can't even manage his own life, you know?
Right.
And what was the hook with Iron Man? You know, well, there wasn't really a hook. So what we tried to do was, the one thing that set Tony Stark apart was this corporate world that he had, right? This giant global corporation. And we want that to be the setting for him. And also we had to get rid of the heart attack because it drove me crazy. I mean, he had 50 heart attacks up until we took over the book. And even in that era, heart transplants were commonplace. You think the most brilliant guy in the world can't fix his own heart?
Right.
So it seemed that if we were going to create a corporate world with Roxxon Corporation and Justin Hammer and all these things, that we should have something else. This another sword of Damocles hanging over his head. And it seemed, and Dave and I hashing it out, it seemed like Tony Stark would be absolutely prone to falling prey to abuse, chemical abuse, which is common in that sort of industry. So that was the thing. We pitched it to the editor, and he just said, "Okay, just do it right," you know, and we did. So there.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, pivoting into Valiant, and you know, the
smooth transition, bro.
Here we go. Here we go. We're in. When
you've had as storied of a career as what we know of, and Chat GPT tells us, you know, we could be here all night. But I mean, the energy that you were talking about in Marvel, you know, seemed to just directly transfer over to Valiant. So, you know, can you tell us a little bit about, you know, you making the decision to walk out and help start a new fledgling?
Yeah, I really pissed John Romita Jr. off, which I really regret to this day, because I was writing Iron Man at the time. I took over writing the book. I was doing the whole thing. And we had planned to do Armor Wars 2, and Johnny came back. All right. Now, I was living in Colorado at the time. And that's when I got the call from Jim offering me an opportunity to work on the startup company. And, you know, so I mulled it over for a while. I hadn't talked to Jim in like 2 years, you know, I mean, since he was summarily dismissed from Marvel. And so apparently Jim had raised $2 million with Steve Mazarsky to do Marvel characters on ice.
Wow.
Did you know? This is where the startup money from Valiant came from, was that, he and Mazarsky got together and they were going to do Marvel on ice, right? And apparently that fell through.
Oh, wow. Although it did happen, I think like 4 years, like before the pandemic, there was like a tour called Marvel on Ice, and it's like
he was just a little too soon. You know, Marvel wasn't really a name to conjure with at that point, but they decided to take the money and start a comic book company. So Jim always kind of used me as his idea guy. He would bounce ideas on me. I was good at coming up with concepts and stuff like that. He didn't always love all of them, but so and remember, I'm going to preface this by saying that I hadn't seen him or talked to him in 2 years. Okay, and in that time, the reason I was in Colorado is I was going through rehab. All right, because the more successful I got, the more I partied until I absolutely lost control, and then had to take care of my business, which I did, and it's like, so when he made the offer, I had to really weigh it, heavily. I meant going back to New York City, after being gone for a couple of years and whatever, but an opportunity to own what I create sounded like a pretty good idea. And so after weighing it over, which was really funny too, by the way, because at the time, my live-in girlfriend was Catherine Bollinger, who I was working with me. Yeah. So so I brought her with me to Valiant, but I was forced to break up with her because I wasn't allowed to have a relationship.
HR came in, huh?
Yeah, HR, the HR bug got me, so she wasn't thrilled about that, but she wanted to pursue comics too, so that's kind of what happened. But
I got asked too.
We're still friends, though. I mean, it was contentious.
What was Jim's pitch to you? What was like Jim's pitch?
I don't remember exactly what it was. He just says, "I need your, I need your brain. I need that creativity, that you bring to it, whatever." I don't remember what the bullshit was. To be quite honest with you. All I know was I was ready for a new start in my whole life, right? Sure. And it seemed like, okay, I'd been Marvel, 15 years at this point or whatever, and it's kind of, this is 89, right? Okay. So it was kind of like it was time for a change. And again, the idea, although it didn't work out that way, the idea of me being able to own a piece of what I create, because Marvel didn't have creator royalty set up back then or whatever. So X Factor, that's another one where I wasn't having any fun anymore and left.
Oh, no.
Yes. I decided to roll the dice. I talked to Dickie, and Dickie had trepidations about the people involved, but he at the same time said, you really have, if you're going to pursue your ultimate goal, of doing everything in the business, he goes, you're going to, because he trained me to be, a bit on the business side as well as the comic side. He used to encourage me to go up to the 11th floor at Marvel and sit there and talk to Millie, and so I used to go into Jim Galton's office, the president of the company. He had an open door policy. He's always loved the fact that I was the only freelancer who would come up to the 11th floor and hang out, But I would ask him questions like, how much did it cost to make this? Why do I get paid such shitty wages? It's like, but I got a chance to break it all down, right? So, I had a better idea of how my industry was run, the idea of being able to go and have some control over what I create or whatever like that seemed like it was really it outweighed what I was giving up at Marvel. So I went ahead and did it, which pissed Johnny off. So he didn't speak to me for a couple of years.
Oh no.
Yeah. It's like, and we were like best buddies too. It was like, but he was really ticked off that he'd left what he was doing to come to do, Iron Man. Then I do one issue with him and leave.
Wow.
I'm a dick. What do you want?
So you go over and help. So you were working on the early Nintendo books. I at OAX brought you and got you to sign the Cheezosaurus Rex.
Hey, you have the most valuable Bob Layton comic ever made.
Did you work on the Adventures of the O's?
I don't remember, and I absolutely probably did. Any of the commercial books I did something with. Yeah. Because the Voyager Communications was the parent company, We did a lot of advertising, ad art. We did stuff for Land of the Lost. We did like the box art for Land of the Lost. We did, those Cheezosaurus. Yeah, and if you chat GPT that, you'll see that it's the most expensive Bob Layton comic you can buy. A good grade, a good CGC grade Cheezosaurus will go for almost $1,000.
Wow, that's awesome. So you guys were like a creative services company. You guys were helping with advertising.
No, the idea was us to be full service to not only do commercial stuff. We did a bunch of stuff like that, but also to produce regular comics. Except that we really got off on the wrong track.
Oh, how so? What was that wrong track?
Because I was brought over to basically, run the bullpen and to also write and ink the superhero comics, right? And then Steve and Jim got the idea. They got the license to Nintendo and wrestling, WWF.
Oh yeah.
And they decided, wow, these are such huge franchises. We sink our money into this. And I have to say, honestly, I was against it from the beginning. That's why I wish Fred was here, because Fred would back me up on this. I said, these are not, neither one of these are audiences who are going to read comics, because they want to play Mario. They don't want to read about it. It's like they want to watch wrestling. They don't want to read about,
Well, and doesn't that kind of get away from the creator-owned idea too that you were talking about?
Yeah. So the first year, they pretty much blew the most of the money on producing, which is they lost their shirts on it. I mean, man. I mean, you couldn't. And then Winston Folks, who was the CFO of the company, they produced. I remember at one point they decided to put it together into a hardback book. Right, all the Nintendo stuff, and try to sell it that way.
Wow!
And it turned out that it cost more than they were charging.
Oh my gosh!
Yes. Needless to say, that Winston Folks once Triumph, the parent company, the investment company that put the money up for the Ice Capades, once they found out about that, Winston Folks was out the door. Right. Yeah.
Wow.
But
there we go. He has one.
Cost more than they charged.
So basically, Jason, you now know that cost you less than what they spent on it. So you got a deal. I'll say that.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that's not what you call a good thing. So what happened was they blew through most of the money. So Triumph, Michael and Melanie, the two people that ran Triumph, the venture capital company, They wanted to know where the money went, so they sent Fred Pierce in to basically spy. He came in basically to oversee what expenditures and all this kind of stuff, and like I said, try to get us back on the right track. So Fred was there, from the beginning, which is one of my personal victories. Is like, even though Fred was sent there by Triumph, we flipped him and he became one of us. It was by the time we really started getting up ahead of steam, Fred had already kind of jumped ship and became a Valiant guy. It's like which was fun. Like I said, Fred and I have been friends for the entire time. It's like he's an amazing fellow, but he's a no bullshit kind of guy too, and there was a lot of bullshit going on. Yeah, but here's what's really funny. So we had these crappy offices in Midtown, like we're on a loft, right? A rat-infested loft, and prime example of Fred, right? When we first moved in there, we could not get the phones in because in New York City, right? Especially in that era, you'd have to wait weeks to have them put the phone lines in, and Fred's just like. He calls the phone company and he basically says, what he does is he talks to some supervisor and says, whoever shows up here, I got $500 cash, whoever shows up here and hooks our phones up, and the phones were hooked up within 12 hours. Okay. Yeah. I mean, Fred just knew how to get things done, so he was that kind of guy. So, yeah, so we're in this rat infested place up there. But so Steve was still running. Steve was a legal, was a lawyer, legal
right,
representative for the music industry.
Right.
He represented Aerosmith and I think Harry Chapin and Cyndi Lauper at one point until they had a falling out. But his assistant was Lauren Davis, the daughter of Clive Davis. So for the entire history of Valiant, there was always a rock and roll contingency coming in and out of this place. You know, he represented the Violent Femmes, and you know, so we would see these guys, Bob Weir from the Grateful Dead. They would just pop into the office. You know, Clive Davis would come up to the office. Clive friggin' Davis, right? Come up to see his daughter. You know, it was like it was a bizarre. You know, because how the two industries kind of started merging together.
It's actually pretty cool. I mean, if you think about it, like for me personally, growing up, I saw, you know, you, Barry, David Michelini, like Don Perlin, like all you guys, you know, Jim Shooter, Bob Hall. You guys were like the Rat Pack to me. Like you guys were like the guys that like had, you know, kind of wore the suits, walked in style, and like, you know, smoked the cigarettes and like delivered just great like adult stories that I could like live and be immersive through. While like, you know, Image guys were like the Ocean 11, right? They go and like, you know, run around. So it was always like a cool, like, I don't know, you guys are so freaking cool. Like, how did
I'll credit Steranko for that. Steranko, who I'm dear friends with, was the first rock star cartoonist. He was a guy who would show up at cons in the like mid 70s or whatever. Not only was he a revolutionary artist, redefined storytelling, but he was also, he'd come in with his Italian suits and his wavy hair and all this kind of stuff, and he would like, you know, he would do magic tricks on stage and stuff like that. I mean, he was an amazing entrepreneur and showman. And I remember seeing him in '74 at Detroit Triple Fanfare, meeting him there, and I said, "That's the Image, yeah, you know, because you want to see that, right? You want to see the guys that are creating this wonderful stuff having the best time of their lives."
True.
Right? I mean, that's part of what the mystique of all this is like, God, you know, I mean, nothing's worse, and you guys have all been there, you know, the line about never meet your heroes. You go up to a con and the guy's just a miserable wretch, right? And you're kind of like, oh, God, how disappointing, right? You know, yeah. Look, Noel's going, how many times has that happened? It's like, what the hell's wrong with him? Right? That's not what you guys want. That's not really. I mean, so the rockstar persona is part of it to me. You know, that was all part of the show. It's part of. That's why when I got the Valiant, there was the very loud suits. You know, the you know, the crazy hair, all the stuff. You know, was part of it. Just creating an ambiance.
Super cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Carl,
let's dive into the works, man. I mean,
no, it's showbiz, man.
Yeah,
always has been.
It probably helps in recruiting too, right? If you're recruiting a young, you know, artist that, you know, is making what, $50 a page or whatever it was back then, you know, to have this atmosphere where all these rock stars are coming in and out and you're, you know, feeling cool at a con and stuff, it probably helps with recruiting.
Well, when I was charged to set up Nabro, the bullpen, basically, the idea was I went back, as I said, to the studio system. And I said, what we got to do, since we can't attract the Image guys, because the Image guys are out there doing their own stuff, we can't attract those huge. Now, I got Barry to come over, okay?
Yeah,
but Barry didn't like Jim. So he came over with the idea that he would only work with me. You know, as long, you know, and that's how I got him over there, was basically because Barry and I had been friends for really close friends for like 10 years.
Speaking of Barry, look at this.
So yeah, it was like the idea was, yeah, you come over and it'll just be me and you on the projects that you do, which stuck in Jim's craw, of course. That's why you'll see that Jim winds up rewriting so much of this. But I mean, they got along well enough, I suppose. But he he had a bad time with him at Marvel, so he came over with the idea that I would either edit him or write him. All right, so and Barry was without a doubt the thing that really put us on the map. I mean, without Barry, I don't think there would have been a Valiant, because he legitimized everything. Because what I was doing, because we had Don Perlin and we had a few other guys, old school guys there, right? I was rating the Kubert School, because at the time the Kubert School wasn't very good. It's gotten considerably better, from what I understand now. But at the time, a lot of kids would go there. They pay for a semester, and then they would be totally what's the word I'm looking for? Disappointed in the system or whatever. And so when the word got out that we were hiring, is I would get all these portfolios from the Kubert School, kids coming in. I'd hire one of them, and then they'd say, "Well, I have a friend over there too." That's how most of the colorists and a lot of the inkers and stuff like that came from the Kubert School, and they worked with me and with Barry and with Don, and we kind of brought them up to speed. So it was a kind of a work as you go kind of thing. I mean, think about this, okay? You're sitting there in the bullpen, right? Just doing your thing. And then Barry friggin' Windsor-Smith leans over your shoulder and says, "Let me show you how to draw that head." This little blue pencil. I mean, it's freaking phenomenal, right? I mean, so yeah, the idea was to let these kids study under us and get better as they went along. But the emphasis was always on story of Valiant, not because the comic stuff had gotten so. When the direct market exploded and people were buying comics basically for art, that's what Image was all about. That's why they would have a 2-page spread of a guy eating a sandwich, just because they could sell it at cons for more money, and we were kind of like, we call those suddenly lunch pages, and the whole idea was for us to do something that was story oriented. That everything was about character and story, which I always believed, not about flashy pictures. And we kind of Valiant, that was the thing, was we made it work. But Barry was the guy who brought the Flash, right? I mean, he was the guy with everything Barry did was, friggin' fantastic. So, how could we go wrong with that? So like I said, he if I have to credit one person for legitimizing Valiant, it was Barry.
Yeah, I didn't realize.
He had his reputation, so a lot of people just wouldn't work with him.
Yeah.
So, even my time there with him was relatively contentious once I was sober.
I mean, it makes sense now because I didn't realize you guys were such good friends. Because when you guys work together, I would say that's the most memorable pages I remember as adolescent. They're really good chemistry.
I was his favorite inker.
You had a great chemistry.
But we were. I mean, he was Uncle Barry to my daughter. I mean, it was like, Barry would come in on Fridays. He would take a train in. He lived in Woodstock. He'd come in on Fridays. He'd bring some Archer and Armstrong pages. And I would go up to visit my daughter because my daughter lived with my ex-wife in Woodstock. So I'd stay at Uncle Barry's, right? So I'd have custody so it would be Shauna and Barry and I at his cottage. He had a cottage, like this ivy-covered cottage in the woods. And, Barry taught me how to eat, cook Indian food and all that. We were best of friends for a long time. And it took a while to convince him to come to Valiant. But like I said, once I, would set the rules, it was like, who's going to say no to him, But I think it's stuck in Jim's craw a little bit that Barry didn't want to work with him directly, I mean, they eased up a bit over time, but then it got contentious again. And it's like, guess who's always in the middle of that?
Playing referee? Or just trying to dodge?
We're talking about two of the largest egos in the comic book industry, okay? So, that's not a good place to be stuck. Yeah, Archer and Armstrong was, that was also the strong. Hello, Sonic Dan, man.
Hey, Sonic Dan, in the building.
I love it. Yeah, old friend Dan. Good to see you here, man. Yeah, it was Archer and Armstrong was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back there in a lot of ways, because I wrote it. Basically it was an idea that I pitched to Jim over dinner one night, and I was supposed to write, and I did write it, and the thing is, the numbers came in and the sales were huge.
Yeah.
Right. Three numbers on it. So Jim decided that it wasn't really, my script wasn't really good enough. So he went home, rewrote it, and put his name on it, which pissed Barry off, to be honest, because it was pretty much the same script, and that really pissed Barry off, and it kind of started.
Oh no.
Yeah. It was unfortunate. We settled it by me becoming the editor and letting Barry write the thing himself, which was great. So when I'd go up to visit my daughter, Barry and I would sit down, and we would actually hammer out the next issue of Archer and Armstrong together.
Wow.
So I mean, although I'm uncredited, Barry would sit there and we would just talk out where we think it should go and blah 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 blah, because that's what a good editor does. He works with his creative team, And I always kind of thought of myself as a showrunner, right? A guy like on a TV series. I'm not writing the episodes, but I'm guiding the series along.
Yeah, you've got input.
That's and that was it. I remember I came up with the idea for the Ninja Nuns.
That's awesome.
And Barry went to bed. He says, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." He goes, "I'm not doing it. I'm simply not doing that." Wakes up the next morning. He's like, "I have this great idea. We'll have them fight ninja nuns," and it's like,
those are the best.
Well, I love brilliant, man, brilliant. So although uncredited, we co-plotted almost every issue that he did, because I mean, he did most of the work. Don't get me wrong, but I was always there with input, because I'd spend the weekends staying at his place,
Wow, that's cool. I mean, we'll jump around. I mean, Archer and Armstrong, that's probably one of the most meaningful titles to me personally. So we'll play.
I love whimsy, as you know from Hercules. I am a fan of whimsy.
Yeah.
So I got to do that 3 times in my career. I got to do Hercules, and then I got to do it with Barry and Archer and Armstrong, and then I got to do it with Dr. Mirage. So it's like whimsy is one of my favorite things to do.
We'll get to Dr. Mirage, but for now, I want to talk about Rai, because one of the questions we had was, how much did manga
cover? Okay, I'm going to tell you the story.
Talk to us.
This is not talking out of school. Most of you know Jim was incredibly bad about deadlines. He was probably the worst creator in terms of deadlines that you would ever work with. Ask my exec. Okay. The reason why Dan will tell you too, the reason why all the issues written by Shooter have the balloons pasted in is because the last thing that we got in the bullpen was the actual script. Everything else was done.
Oh my god!
Yes, and we would have to paste the balloons. And the hilarious part was after the Jim regime, and we went back to doing comics normal, where people turned their scripts on time. I go to the bullpen one day and I see Jade Mady back there cutting and pasting balloons on, and I go, "Why the hell are you doing this?" And it's like, I said, "You can do it on the boards," and they're like, "Really?" Yeah, I said, "You can letter on the boards." So yeah, it took a little. They gotten so many bad habits from that I had to kind of re-educate them into actually lettering on the freaking art. But Dan can tell you, because a lot of his art in his collection has really bad glue stuff all over it, right?
Yeah.
I think we all have a page or two like that.
Yeah, Dan has one of the best collections in Valiant world.
But that Rye cover, we were so late on the book, we really had almost no concept of it all, that David Lapham had done a little 5x8 thumbnail. I mean, like on a card, right? More or less, of that drawing. And because we had to have it solicited in Diamond, I just blew it up on a Xerox machine and lightboxed it and inked it from that little drawing.
What? That's awesome.
There is no pencils for that it was all done, blown up from a little sketch.
That's pretty damn cool.
Yeah. Well, at the time I wasn't thrilled about it. Yeah, Dan says, yep. Yeah. On everything, man.
So how did you decide which books you were like, how was it decided which ones you were writing or which ones you were drawing at that time?
Well, it depends on what part of Valiant you're talking about. Because there were eras and stages. I mean,
okay.
Because up until a certain point, I was also the production manager there. I was running the bullpen day to day with and with the cut and paste guys and all this stuff and the colorists and everything like that. And as we grew, I could do less and less. But originally, as you remember, I was inking all the books basically.
Right, all of them. Yeah,
it was.
You made a house ink. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really insane, man. Well, house inking, Brian, house inking style. I've heard all that before. I think it's because if you're like, for instance, if you're a Dick Giordano acolyte like I was, or Klaus Janson, or it could go down the list of guys who worked for Dickie. We all have similarities because that's who we learned from. I mean, a lot of the inkers that I trained there learned from me, so therefore they kind of. I mean, look at Brett Breeding. He was one of my assistants. Brett, for his first 5-6 years of the comics, was pretty much imitating me, until he developed a style all his own. Which Dickie would always say, you get good the day you quit trying to be somebody else. But when you're starting out, you emulate your mentors, right? So if there was a house style, I mean, better that we had some style.
Right.
But I think for me, like anytime I sit down and I draw anything Barry related, I have to ink it like Barry, because it just doesn't look right. If I do a solar, I got to render it like Barry rendered solar, and it doesn't look right to me, So I just did. In fact, I'll show you. I just did. Some guy ordered a Weapon X head.
Oh wow!
Nice.
Headshot. But I mean, I still had to get my Barry on to do it, because I just like, well, what else do you do, right? So I mean, if there was a house style, it wasn't deliberate, but Barry was the mark, the high water mark, and I think everybody tried to chase that as much as they possibly could. And I was their mentor, so there you go.
Yeah.
If they looked like my or similar, it was because that's who they learned from.
Makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. I think JJ kind of alluded to that when we interviewed her, was that you had, and you mentioned this earlier about bringing people out of the Kubert School, but David Lapham and a lot of these guys that got their start, there at Valiant. That makes sense what you're saying, that they would just mimic those people that is teaching them.
Well, yeah, it was so funny because so many of the great colorists and artists like Mike Cavallero, who became our head colorist there. He was straight out of Kubert School as well, but no, it was just it was an organic thing. It kind of was just growing. I wasn't. You can't control it exactly. Sometimes it just. But again, I wanted to create that atmosphere there, where people could exchange ideas. They could help each other. Some of my best memories is those gangbang color jobs that all the kids would stay up overnight. They'd get pizza and beer, and they'd stay up all night at the studio. They would stay there in the studio, and basically turn it into a party and to get one of the books done on time or whatever.
I thought you were about to take the conversation to another direction.
No. Oh, do we have guys bang? Do we have? There was some. There wasn't any office sex per se, okay, but there was some relationships. So there always are. But I was very big on hiring women too. So unlike the other companies that only had a few women in any sort of position at all, I was very big on that. So we had. Not quite a 50-50, but we had a good balance between male and female, and as well as a ethnic balance as well. So we had Latinos, and we had Black, and we had Asians. We had the whole 9 yards. But I really wanted it to be representative of the entire comic industry. So I didn't. If you could do the job, I didn't look at anything else.
Yeah, in fact, a friend, a mutual friend, who you brought into industry, Mr. Bernard Chang,
my son.
Yeah, I called you his dad. So
I get Father's Day cards from him to this day.
Yeah.
I went to Taiwan last year. I went to Taiwan to actually visit him and his mom. I love Mama Chang. She's a doll, but she used to come up to the office and stuff. But yeah, Bernard has always been like a son. Him and Sean Chin both.
Yeah.
The two of the best discoveries I've ever made. I was at the 93 San Diego Comic-Con, and he and Sean came up like a match set, and both of them were camera ready for Boo. All right, which is rare. It's only happened 2 or 3 times in the business where somebody walks in, here's my samples, and I'm like, holy shit, you draw better than me. That's what happens. I mean, you look at Bernard and you look at Sean, and it's like they're rock stars, right? I mean, they're amazing, and they were amazing from Boo, right? So, the genesis of Dr. Mirage, by the way, we're jumping ahead a little bit. Was
jumping around.
At some point, Mazarsky comes to me and says, "Look, should I do it like Steve Mazarsky with this lisp?" I always said there's no God because otherwise, if you have a lateral S lisp, why the hell would God give you the name Steve Mazarsky?
Oh man, that's rough. But this book was beautiful as they were going through it.
Oh my God, no! It was also the most fun I've ever had writing. Okay, without a doubt. I just say in terms of fun. And the biggest thing that I loved about it is that the women in the office would fight over the advance copy that would come from Quebecor. We would get it, we would get the body right in advance, and they would all fight over it over lunch who gets to read it first, which I took as a personal victory.
Yeah,
because I wanted to do something that appealed to women too, right? And again, and had some whimsy to it. And so, so what happens to Mazarsky? This is my favorite issue ever. So the thing was, Steve says, "Hey, we have all these other gold key characters besides Magnus and Solar and Turok, right?" He goes, "Are there anything in their line that is worth us exploring? Since we have a very magnanimous deal with the gold key copyright holders." So I went and I looked through the thing, and I saw the only thing I saw was Dr. Spectre. All right. So I started writing a new premise for Dr. Spectre, and that's what this was. And I took it into Steve, and it was called The Second Life of Dr. Spectre. And he goes, "This is too good for us to give away. Just change the name, and we'll just publish it ourselves."
Cool.
So it became The Second Life of Dr. Mirage. Yes.
Awesome.
I was a huge fan of this book because just growing up as an Asian American kid, you don't really see outside of like Wolverine and Morocco, kind of exposure to like the Asia side of things.
But there were no real Asian American lead characters.
No,
and again, that's me trying very hard to break those barriers because I wanted to appeal to more women readers, which I don't think the average comics does because it all centers on violence for the most part, right? But I wanted some romance. I wanted, some intrigue. I wanted stuff that was fun that would get laughs. I mean, there's Rico. My favorite lines always come out of Rico. That's when he's locked in the bathroom. Is that when he's locked in the bathroom? Yeah. Oh my God, I love it. I had so much fun writing him because there was a friend of mine out in Long Island who I patterned that after, who was, literally Rico. Okay. So that again, and having Bernard was his very first job. And of course, he drew himself as the character, which I didn't care about. That's fine. So, but it was a chance for us to work together from Boo, from the time he walks in the door. And again, he just constantly blew me away with the beautiful art and everything. He was like a son to me. We were very close during the 13 issues that we did or whatever.
Yeah.
As well as all the other things that he did for us, of course. But I tried to mentor him through his entire career and followed him after he left. And it's like he was just amazing. But yeah, that book was just so much fun on so many levels. Is that the famous snow issue?
This one, what was the snow issue? What happened?
The one after this, I think. Well, here's what happened. This is really funny. Bernard got So in this issue, Bernard got behind the deadlines. Okay, he got really in deadline trouble, right? So he's like, Bob, is there anything you can do? I mean, to help me out here? Like keep it simple or whatever. So I decided to set the entire issue in the snow or in a coal mine, this gold mine, right? So that everything would either be white or black. Right?
Oh, that's hilarious, dude.
So no backgrounds to deal with. So he could pretty much get the thing, done on time. So I actually wrote the story around the artist's deadline. That's pretty funny. It turned out fine, but like I said, I'll never do that again. But I loved him. He was like my son. So, yeah. So I wrote an entire story in a snowstorm or a gold mine. There you go.
All right, I know we jumped ahead, but let's jump to one other question that we had. So Harbinger, that was one of the earliest titles. I think we had a question surrounding the car.
Yeah.
What was that question, Jason? Do you remember?
Well, late again on the plate.
Oh, the plate. Yeah, the plate again.
Obviously, an in-joke to Jim's deadline problems.
Oh my God, that's what it was. Okay, got it. We were curious about that.
That's funny.
Oh yeah. Thank you, Hoarder's Hide. I forgot about Bad Eggs too. Bad Eggs was like one of my other favorite things that I did that nobody read, of course. We can get to that later. But what about Harbinger? Because I had very little to do with that.
I think it had to do with just
if Exo was my book, Harbinger was Jim's book. I mean, I ate the covers. I didn't have much else to do with it otherwise because
Harbinger.
It always seemed to me very derivative of the X-Men, and I wasn't really thrilled about that.
Yeah,
it was obvious. I mean, Exo, nothing like Iron Man. Other than
nothing.
Yeah, I mean, he's Conan in a can because I was a big Conan the Barbarian fan as a kid. I used to read all the Robert E. Howard novels with the great Frazetta covers, and so the idea of doing Conan, set in a modern age with a super weapon, that's a turn on,
Right.
But that's where the similarities end. It's the suit of armor, right?
He had that corporate environment though that you mentioned bringing in with Iron Man.
Yeah,
sure. Think there's any similarities there?
Yeah, except that he didn't run the corporation or anything like that. He just took advantage of it, right?
Sure.
Yeah. And besides, as you remember correctly, the corporation belonged to the Spider aliens.
Right.
He conquered. It's he conquered it. So there.
Fair enough.
But Harbinger always seemed a bit derivative to me of the X-Men, and that's why I never was really thrilled about it. But it was Jim's book, and more power to him. Fine, But yeah, I had very little input on that.
So there's I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It just wasn't my thing. I was more interested in the new stuff that we were creating.
So Brian Wells asked a question a while back, and he asked, is it true that Jim didn't help you with your sobriety and was more of an enabler for you?
Well, I'm Chomchi.
Okay. And then also, I think it was Brian that mentioned that Fred was a really good poker player.
I don't know. I never played. I wouldn't play poker with Fred. Right? Fred, when he was in Israel, was a demolition expert. He would blow up.
What?
Yes. Fred was hardcore military. In the Israeli army. So I always said he was much better at blowing things up than creating stuff.
That's great.
Which is true because, boy, when we had a hassle, if somebody was giving us shit, I'd send Fred's nickname was Hammerhead because I'd send him in, and he would find a nail and hammer it, man. I mean, nobody screws with Fred, So you got to have a guy like that on your team, somebody who's relentless, and as long as he's on the right side of the argument, right? But he also tell you when you're dead wrong. But that's how you got the nickname Hammerhead, because he would just go after somebody like there's no tomorrow if he thought they were doing us wrong. And no qualms about it. So yeah, it's better to have somebody. We create stuff. Have a guy that blows stuff up.
So one of the things you mentioned before about the coloring of the books, right? So I'm coming to Valiant as a first-time reader, and then kind of comparing notes with these guys. And one of the things that we talked about early on, and one of the things that really struck me about the books was the colors. Could you talk about like what made the colors so special and so vibrant and everything, like the process that was used or something along those lines?
Yeah, well, the problem with Comic Color at the time was it was a 16-color palette that they used, 4-color press, right? And in Quebecor. And that limited the amount of colors you can do. And we really thought that that hand painting these things, because it's before the advent of computer color. Yeah. So it was trying to come up with a method. And boy, there was all kinds of experimentation done with that, the early days of how we're going to do this. We wind up printing, printing on thin Bristol paper, the actual page, and then mounting it onto cardboard to allow the colorist to color it without it bubbling, right? So that we had a whole process in production of them just pasting print size Xeroxes basically onto these boards so they could be colored. But we thought with the look at some of Barry's coloring, in a few of those things. You'll see he did just amazing stuff. To me, and I give JJ a lot of credit. Alpha and Omega, the big story that we did, right?
Yeah.
The origin of Solar, right? In the back of Solar, that was like one of the absolute best things that I think I've ever been associated with, because she did an exemplary job coloring that as well. And one of my problems with Marvel was I was just, the color was so limited. And I used Zipatone. Everyone loved the zip that I used on Iron Man and stuff. I did it basically to combat color because you couldn't mute colors or anything like that. So it was actually a device I would use to create a metallic look or to mute colors that would otherwise be garish. So this hand painting concept, once we kind of got the thing down, gave the books, I think, a vibrancy that the other comics didn't have.
Yeah, they definitely stand out.
That's what pisses me off about it now, because it's like coloring has just gone out the window, with the exception of Alex.
Yeah.
The colors of the comic industry are just shit. I mean, there's no other way around it. Yeah.
So good back then. I mean, here's Sonic Dan and his gallery. I mean, he was one of the first kind of comic art fans that I came across.
Oh, yeah. He goes back as far as I do.
Yeah. So much stuff.
Yeah. Him and I used to get letters from 11-year-old Dinesh.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Way back when.
Yeah. But,
So,
I think, again, it was a matter of teaching contrast and being able to do airbrush effects and things like that we couldn't do in the normal comics. That was one of the things that set us apart from Image or Marvel or whatever like that. I mean, Marvel was heading down the wrong path anyway. I mean, their books, they lowered the bar, so they were letting people in the industry that could barely hold a pencil and didn't know which end made the squiggly marks. And some of the books they put out, the quality was just so poor because they were just trying to pump as much product out into the speculator market as they could, which I was always dubious of.
Mm-hmm.
A typical week at Valiant, okay, and it's in our heyday, okay, when I was editor-in-chief, or whatever, say Wednesdays, what we would do, because, well, first of all, I would always get pissed because most of the Nobro guys would leave at noon to go to the comic shop to buy new comics, which would just piss me off, because they're like Jesse Pinkman, it's like, yeah, make the product and snort it too, okay?
Right.
I gave up my comic book collection the second I started working for Dickie. Dickie made me give up. He said, find another hobby because this is your job, So, I did. I became a pro football fan. So, I used to walk down the Nobro and they'd be reading their comics and I'd pretend to shoot them in the back of the head because I'd be so pissed off. It's like, okay, because all they were absorbing was other people's stuff. I mean, one time I'm sitting there and this guy, one of the inkers is like, he's got a comic and he's doing a tree and he's imitating and I pick him up by the collar and I drag him over to the window and there was like a garden down below us. And I'm like, look, a tree. I go down there and draw it,
Nice.
I go, those are two-dimensional representations of something that's three dimensions in somebody else's mind. The only way you're going to learn this is to actually interpret it for yourself. Not, the stuff like that would drive me crazy. Which hence I got my reputation for, being snarky. But at the same time, so Wednesday would be over, right? So I'd say everybody would stop at 5, and then we would have our guest lecturer. So every Wednesday I would have Stan Drake or Barry Windsor Smith, or even Dickie, would come in and teach a class. So they would all stay afterwards and they would do that. So, I mean, I don't know any place else that was doing that, the teaching as you go kind of thing, but can you imagine sitting there getting a free, 90-minute art lesson from Barry Windsor Smith, right? That was some of the beauty of it all.
That's
Not
awesome.
that the job drove me crazy. I mean, it was exhausting. I mean, once the whole shooter regime was over and I was running the thing full time, I was literally living in the office. I mean, I was there almost 24/7. It was crazy.
Wow.
It got so bad. This is what I love. But the comics were doing better and better. But it got so bad that the Knobs took up a collection and sent me to Puerto Rico.
Wow.
They said, you need a vacation. You have to leave,
That's pretty cool. That's cool because it's like a great recognition of your work.
Yeah.
It showed that they cared about how many people buy their boss a vacation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I love, that's one reason why I love them all, but they knew that I was way too stressed out, that I hadn't taken a break. I was tired and grumpy and all that kind of stuff. So they basically forced me to leave, it turned out to be good. I mean, that wound up being like a regular thing I started doing. I was going to Puerto Rico. I even took some of the Knobs with me the next year.
Wow.
That's cool.
As part of the trip. So that's what I'm saying. There's that absolute sense of camaraderie and everything that I don't think will ever happen again. It was in a lot of ways very Camelot-y, you know? Yeah.
That's awesome. So, can you tell us a little bit about how Unity came about?
That was the brainchild of the greatest marketing genius I've ever met in my life, John Hartz.
Oh,
John, John
tell
Hartz.
us more about John. Tell us more about John and his role.
John was actually, interestingly enough, he had worked with Pacific Comics for a while. And stuff like that. But he's also the son-in-law of Neil Adams.
Wow.
But and I forget. I don't forget who hired John, but John immediately came in. Like, I'll give you a prime example of how brilliant John was. All right, and this is crazy because to tell the end of the story first, when we all got paid, when we sold the company, I mean, John got, I think, $4 million, $5 million from his percentage of the company, right?
Wow.
He disappeared, never to be heard from again.
Huh?
He just left the industry, left everything. No one I know has ever heard from John Hartz ever again. He just dug a hole and buried it with his money, himself with his money. I mean, he just disappeared, which is really weird because I had nothing but love for John, and I kind of miss him, But he was the most brilliant marketing guy I'd ever met. So here's the deal. So we're coming up with the concept for Exo Manowar, right? And at this stage, it's just called Manowar, right? Manowar, right? And John is looking at like the whole concept thing and the concept art and all that stuff. He's like, he goes, how do you feel? I go, this. He goes, this is an exoskeleton, right? I said, yeah. He goes, the number one book selling right now, selling, hundreds of thousands of copies is Jim Lee's X-Men. How do you feel about calling it Exo Manowar after the exosuit? He goes, that way they'll place the book right next to the X-Men.
Wow,
that's brilliant.
I go, you son of a bitch. That's
brilliant.
Freaking brilliant. Yeah. And we did, and it wound up being our number one selling book as a result.
Wow. Cool.
But John had the idea of doing this concept book and basically giving the first one away. He says, again, it's the pusher in the playground thing, Hey kid, here's a little bag of snoot for you. It's like, great, no problem, no charge, right? And as soon as you're hooked, then it's going to cost you, right? So that was the idea. He said, playground pusher, let's give them the book for free. And, let's give them a Jim Shooter, Bob Layton, Barry Windsor Smith book for nothing, And it's like, it put us on the map. I told you. And it's Barry. Barry legitimized everything, right?
Yeah.
Because, you guys, I don't have to talk bad about Jim because you guys know Jim's problems. I mean, Jim's had, But again, it was the idea that Barry always legitimized these things, right? And John's marketing was just brilliant, right? And it worked. It put us on the map, no people love. I'm still a big believer in free shit. Give away free shit.
I agree.
Yeah, it's like it's the best way in the world to get people involved in what you're doing. Is to give away free shit. So
speaking of Barry, you also have Frank and Walt. Like, what happened here? Like, how did you guys get them?
Oh, nothing. Just made a bunch of calls and said, Jim did a lot of that because I'm kind of the Frank Miller stuff was kind of, but the Walt stuff I liked.
Nice.
Yeah, I thought Frank didn't really fit our look or anything like that.
I remember as a kid, I was thrown off. I was really
they all look like Rorschach tests to me. But I love Frank. Don't get me wrong, but at that point he was evolving into something weird. And I know he was a big name or whatever, somebody we normally wouldn't get. So the fact if we're promoting something, they have Frank Miller covers when he's doing, he's doing one of the hottest books out there, Dark Knight or whatever, then fine. Okay. I get that. I'm a big enough whore that I realize that, names sell.
Sure. And then this made more sense. Like, I think Walt.
Walt.
I think
there were a couple of guys I wanted to get so bad at Valiant. Like, I begged Johnny so many times. And at that time, he was still a hardcore Marvel guy. He would not leave Marvel.
But speaking of hardcore, how about this guy?
Okay. This is one of the funniest stories in the history of Valiant. Didn't any of you guys ever wonder why Jim Lee was doing a cover for us when he was the
I remember it came on stand. I was like, what the hell? Why is he doing this?
Okay, this is an absolutely true story. You're gonna love this.
Everything we speak of today is the absolute truth, guys.
Oh no, it is.
All the viewers. Anything that you've heard,
for those of you that know Jim Lee, all right, or follow him, write him about this. He'll tell you the absolute truth. So we're getting ready to do hardcore. This is the next book concept coming out of my editorial department, right? And we got to figure out what we're going to do for the cover, right? So what happens was Steve, I told you, Mazarski was in the rock and roll business, right?
Yep.
So he knew everyone in the rock and roll world and stars and stuff like that. And it turns out that Jim, forgive him for this, this is the biggest U2 fan in the world. You know, I mean, apparently worship Bono, right? And they were coming to San Diego or whatever, or wherever he was living out there at the time, right? I forget where Image was out. Was it Alameda or I don't know. Anyway, so U2 was coming there and he couldn't get tickets. So he calls Mazarski because they were friends at that point. They had met at many of the Diamond conferences and stuff like that. And they hit it off. They were good friends. And he said, can you get me tickets to the U2 concert? And Steve, being Steve, said, well, you know, you do something for me, I'll do something for you. He goes, I'll make a few calls, I'll get it for you. You have to do something for me. And he says, what that? He goes, we got a brand new issue coming out, number 1. But I said, it would look really good with a Jim Lee cover. And Jim says, done. You know? And yeah, a few days later, this rascal shows up in the mail, right? You know? Yeah, we never paid him because he didn't have to.
Right.
It was traded for U2 tickets.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
That's what, look, a lot of bad things have been said about Steve, and some of them deservedly. But, you know, he was sharp. You know, it's like he was always an opportunist. And this was one of those things where I absolutely loved that he took that time.
And did this sell books? I mean, how many copies do you guys sell of this? Do you remember?
Well, I mean, at that time, all the Valiant books were selling like hotcakes because the speculators were in hard. Okay, which will bring me to another subject in a minute. But I think this was Lapham's last book for us, anyway. Before, it's so funny because when Lapham came to Valiant, he was working on the wrestling books. Jim just said, I don't think this kid has what it takes to get rid of him. And I argued to keep him. And then when the whole regime change happened, Lapham winds up leaving with him. And I'm kind of like, this guy wanted me to fire you, you know? And it's like, you know, I kept you on and this is what I get, right? It's like,
and it's crazy too, because Lapham books are
you never know. But that's okay. It's not, this business isn't about loyalty, man. It's about, you know, getting the job done. So go over and do so he went with Jim and did Plasma or whatever that was.
Warriors of Plasma.
The one Bukkake Comics, you know.
Was that the secret code word? Bukkake Comics?
Bukkake Comics. But that's kind of a shame because I mean I said I had to fight to keep him there, and Dave doesn't even know it. He doesn't know that I had this whole argument with Jim about getting rid of him, you know. Yeah. And it's like, and he's gone on to have a wonderful career. So more power to him. I get no thanks, but that's all right. What was I going to bring up? There was something back. Okay, so you brought up the Jim Lee cover, right? So
Chromium covers? I don't know.
Well, Chromium. That, as I said in the green room, that is the brainchild of Fred Pierce, man. Yeah. Fred always had his finger on the manufacturing pulse because his job was he was VP of manufacturing. So all the content, getting the books printed, distributed, and all that kind of stuff, that was all Fred's purview, right? So Fred would go. He would do many trips up to Quebec, and I don't know too many companies that did that. And he would spend time with Gabe and all the guys up there at Quebecor. And when the idea of doing Chromium came around on the thing, you know, he came back with samples and said, "We can do this." You know, on our books, we could do the literally metallic books. And I'm like, that's just freaking amazing. The idea was, can we do it for cost? You know, what's the cost going to be?
Right.
So, you know, Fred negotiated down to and what's really painful, people don't realize, and Dan probably knows this, those, that cover was hand applique. Every one of those hundreds of thousands of copies had to be pasted on by hand.
Wow.
No way. Why? Like, it's a factory?
So they didn't have the machines created to put the applique on the covers. So Quebecor had to hire a bunch of old ladies to glue those things and stick them on there. Which is crazy when you think about it, because it sold Bloodshot sold 300,000-400,000 copies. So that's a lot of work, man. to say the least. So there you go. Eventually, they got it down where they could do it without that. Like, I don't think Turok or hand. I mean, Fred could clear that, but Turok was not hand applique. But then Fred said, "Hey, well, now we can do a whole cover in Chromium." You know, so then came, Exo Zero, right, which was like still one of my favorite books.
Oh yeah,
that one's great.
Yeah.
Although it created infinite hassles for me later, but that's another story.
What happened? What happened? What did they create for you?
No, it wasn't Exo per se, because the book was a huge hit. Although Quesada would give Shooter a run for his money in terms of being late.
Oh.
Okay, but that book was so popular that I wanted Jimmy and Joe to take over a new concept that I had come up with called Ninjak.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and Joe took 4 months to draw the first issue.
Wow!
Oh no!
First time. Fred, back you up. The first time. Yeah, Dan knew exactly what I was talking about. First time in Valiant history you ever missed a shipping.
Oh wow!
Oh my god! Was that late book? I don't remember actually.
It was a late book. Yeah, because it's also returnable when it's late back then. We never got over that, but it was full Chromium as well, right?
I remember.
People were waiting, and it wasn't as bad as Deathmate Red, I guess, but it was bad. But anyway, so 2 issues into this, Mazarsky tells me to get rid of Joe, right?
Oh no!
Yeah, and he goes, no, he's got to go. He can't, because he's just not turning in pages,
Oh man!
And so Joe never forgave me for that.
Oh no! I mean, you look at the pages, you know why?
Later on in life, I go to Marvel, to try to do some freelance stuff, and guess who's editor in chief? He's going to knock me over with a feather. But he never forgave me for that. Joe to this day doesn't speak to me.
Oh no!
It's unfortunate.
And I basically, I didn't have any choice. The publisher of the company told me he had to go.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Joe, I hope you hear this and can forgive Bob.
Joe, it's fine. It's like, he's not the first guy who hates me. I mean, the wonderful thing about life, right? They said you can judge a man by the enemies he has, and it's like, well, I have some pretty powerful enemies. So I take it as a compliment.
But look at like the works. I mean, this was very early in his career, right? And he was like,
he was right after Azrael or whatever.
Going in.
He was still in kind of his Mignola phase to some degree. But it's great stuff. But if it took 4 months to draw something, it looked great too.
Yeah,
it looks like it took 4 months. I mean, look at the details.
Plus, they kind of dropped the ball. I mean, I hired Mark Moretti. Like I told you, we're working as a showrunner. I came up with the idea in Ninjak, and then I would hire the team to execute. Right. Same with Bloodshot. Same with a lot of the stuff. Right. So, and that's a great cover. I mean,
that's a really good cover.
So I gave them the Ninjak thing, but then Joe kind of went cartoony with it, and like Dr. Silk was not supposed to be this thing that he creates. I mean, what he did was, it was just sort of he was supposed to be more sophisticated than that. It turns out to be a bit of a comic book trope, which is unfortunate. But no, I mean, still, it's like, I don't think this book ever had a chance. It's a shame, because it could have been really, really good had he stayed with the thing. Because I wanted a Batman non-superhero kind of character in the thing. He was kind of a mix between Batman and James Bond. And it just unfortunately never really came into.
Joe just did 3 issues. That's it.
They didn't even do 3. I think he did 2. And then Moretti, this is Mark Moretti.
Moretti now,
imitating Joe. Mark was another guy who was really absolutely versatile guy who came out of nowhere, who was a trainee who wound up writing and drawing and stuff there on a regular basis. a damn good writer, I thought, and a pretty decent artist too. So it's like, again, he was definitely Valiant created, so we had a lot of those.
Mhm.
They're not all Sean Chins, but it's like.
So how long did you stay on after Acclaim, reset everything with
Acclaim? Should I say Chomp Chi to Acclaim? No. That was the beginning of the end for me. Was the deal? I understand the deal. Do you guys know anything about the deal?
No, let's talk about it. I mean, what was I understand, like, when it comes to a lot of this like buy sell stuff, there's a lot of sensitivities, right? But everyone has a different feeling against it. So what was your feeling when you found out about the acquisition?
The reason I have not done any Valiant interviews until now was, like I said, there was so much disinformation. Because, I mean, Shooter has his own story, and that's fine. If he believes that, that's fine too. That's why I kind of wanted Fred on here, because Fred was here from the beginning. Fred will not lie about things, but he pretty much back up anything I would say. And he's a funny son of a bitch too. So I thought, having Fred on here would have been great. Dan knows how funny Fred is. Fred's great. But Fred's also one of the most honest human beings you'll ever meet. It came down basically to this. I told you we were owned by Triumph, venture capitalists, right? And like most venture capital, if you know anything about it, once they've made their money back X amount, they want out.
Yeah,
they're not long-term publisher or long-term investors. They're taking 401ks and retirement funds, investing it to make profit, and then get the hell out of Dodge, right? So, at this point, we're pumping out. We're making about $30 million a year now from a
wow,
$4
that's
million.
like a .com. It's like a .com, man.
We're doing about $30 million a year, right? And Mike and Melanie said we want out. So they empowered Steve and I to go around and shop around, find the best buyer to take over running the company day to day from a investment standpoint. Unfortunately, the highest bidder was Acclaim, who overbid. I mean, the company was probably worth 35, 40, and they offered $65 million.
Wow.
For that.
Ooh.
Yeah. And it's like, of course, everyone sees dollar signs. And that's part of what killed Valiant was greed. Greed from the investor, from the retailers investing, in buying cases and cases of books, right?
The speculator stuff, yeah.
Speculator boom, right?
Yeah.
And then the greed of Valiant, I mean, of that much money, and the fact that Acclaim was probably one of the dirtiest companies on the planet. I mean, they were close to the mafia. Okay, I mean, they were that bad. All right.
Wow.
And they were a shitty video game company too. I mean, if you ever played any of the only good game they ever did was Turok.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
Right.
Turok was a great game.
Most Acclaim games they just licensed from Japan, but most of their games were shit. The stuff they did themselves. And here's the backstory to this. All right, so Steve and I have to go around and present the company to various people who have shown interest in purchasing it. Right. As it turned out, and I only found this out afterwards, that Acclaim had gone to Image and tried to buy Image. What they wanted to do was they wanted new characters, so they didn't have to license everything from Japan, right? Because the licensing fees were huge. So they felt Image was more like their demographic, younger, hipper kind of thing like that. And Greg Fishback, who was the chairman of the board of the company or whatever, said that when Image told him, "No, we're rebels. Go screw yourself." Well, I was like, "We're not going to do that stuff. We're rebels, man." He decided to buy us and turn us into Image. Now, some things are going to start making sense immediately. I just saw the light bulb go over, Carl.
Yeah, wow, interesting.
Is it starting to make sense now?
Yeah, that's crazy.
So Greg Fishback comes in. They buy the company, $65 million. Our John, Steve, and I. Steve gets a larger cut because he's the publisher, obviously, and had more time and money invested. He actually put his own money into the company. So Steve was getting about $8 million out of the deal. John and I were getting about 3.5, 4. And unfortunately, they screwed Fred. They wouldn't get, because Fred had a contentious relationship with, even though he was a VP, Fred got nothing. So what he did was Fred went to he went over, became the publisher of Wizard magazine, and started doing a hatchet job on Valiant. It fits this timeline perfectly, because you see the advent of Acclaim, and then you'll see suddenly Wizard, who we were darlings of Wizard, suddenly they started. Yeah, you remember, don't you?
Oh, that's cool.
They were just shit hammering us.
I always wonder what happened. Like, how come they?
That's Fred being very angry. He blows things up. Remember? So I go. Now that I'm a vice president of a corporate company. First of all, they make me cut my ponytail off, which really upset me. But then I would go out for these corporate meetings out there, and I would watch these guys laugh about screwing their own employees over. They were like mafia guys. Yeah, we gypped them out of vacation money. We did this, that, and they were. I mean, I felt like I needed a shower every time I came back from one. They were out on Long Island, right? But then Greg Fishback sends in a bunch of analysts and stuff one day, and he says, well, they're going to go over the entire book line, and we're going to change everything to suit what we think our audience is going to be. And I said, if you do that, you're going to destroy this company. You're going to destroy this company. The readers will leave en masse, because the one thing that they count on was like good stories, right, or whatever. And it's like, these things have a following. If you go in and create image versions of all this stuff, you're cutting your own throat. So finally, Greg and I got into a shouting match. So what he did was he took my power away. He basically said, okay, then we'll just get somebody else to run the day-to-day. You can just sit in your office, which I did for 6 months. I sat in my office and read boating magazines. They're paying me $300,000 a year plus, my escrow to sit in an office and read boating magazines.
Wow.
While, they basically, so... Anyway, Steven made all these deals during the speculator boom. They brought in Dan Jurgens. They brought in a lot of hot, big name talent, and they were paying him like $40,000 a book. They were paying him a book, things like that, And he needed to break those deals too, because as the market started to dwindle, those weren't lucrative. So I'm at this point, I talked to some friends. I talked to some counselors. Finally I said, I'm not, it's no fun anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
It's important.
So I got a lawyer and I sued him. I sued him for breach of contract, because my contract said specifically I was editor-in-chief, and yet I wasn't doing anything day to day. So I sued him for obstruction. That went on for like 9 months. You imagine I was a really popular guy there. As you can imagine. So eventually we settled out of court. I actually gave back $1.7 million of what I got from the thing in order to buy my way out of the contract.
Jeez.
And hey, I don't regret it to this day. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
This is the right thing to do. My life is worth more than that.
Yeah.
So I gave it back and bought myself out. Now the thing was, they said, they insisted that we're all one big happy family. So I have to continue to work there for a year as a freelancer or whatever. I can't just leave. So they brought Fabian in to break all those bad deals that Steve had made, and to basically turn Valiant into Image. That's why you got the new EXO, the new Ninja. That's Carl, you see?
That's weird. Honestly, I appreciate
Fabian, because Fabian, is a good gig for him. Right?
Yeah. Man, that's crazy. Because the stories went down, but they brought Bart in, they brought Dan Jurgens. I mean, I get it now.
Well, that was Deathmate, and it was like, I brought Bart in way before.
Well, let's talk about this, like Deathmate. So what happened here?
We were doing EXO. Well, Deathmate was a bad idea. Deathmate was a bad idea from Boo, Jim, they went to a conference, Jim and Steve, and they came back with an idea of doing a company crossover. And I looked at him like, are you out of your friggin' mind? These are the guys are the worst deadline guys ever. They don't care about story at all. What the hell are we? I mean, I love the Image guys individually, right?
Yeah.
But conceptually, I mean, it's like, why don't we do a comic about necrophilia to be less offensive? It's like, it made no sense from any level other than commercial, right?
Yeah.
But so here we go, right? So you get Barry Windsor Smith inked by Jim Lee. On our side, you get really good shit.
Yeah, you wrote it too. It was good shit.
Yeah.
I love this page. It was like a great opening.
Well, this Deathmate was really just before Acclaim, right?
Yeah, right before.
Yeah. You know, it was the decision that I made or they made without me once I was depowered. Yeah, I forgot how good this was.
It's so good.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Yeah. Was when they decided to do bi-weekly comics. I said that's the end of the company.
Oh my gosh.
Steve had convinced Acclaim that we make twice as much money if we put the books out every 2 weeks. Wow. You know, and it's like I thought that was just laughable, you know. Well, and here's the deal. Yeah, I mean, this is obviously, it doesn't get any better after this, though, you know?
Yeah, this was, I think, the last hurrah, I almost feel like.
It really was. I mean, it's beautiful stuff any way you look at it, right? Yeah. So, anyway, when things started. Oh, no.
I remember, there's the one that.
This is the story. Right? This is the story, right? The one by Skippy and me, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. You.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The story about that is absolutely true. You guys know that story, right?
What's the story? I don't know the story. You know,
he never turned it in.
Oh, really?
Rob never turned it in.
Oh my God.
So finally, I get Masnarski calls me into his office. It's like, you got to go get it. And I go, what do you mean go get it? He goes, we can't do the book without it. You got to go to Anaheim and you got to sit down there and you got to make him do the artwork.
Wait a minute. So Bob, at the time, like, even though it was a collaboration, you guys were distributing it and actually producing it. Is that
pretty much. Okay. Yeah, pretty much. They were delivering the art. But the point of it is, Steve says, well, you got to go. You got to go get it and make him do it. You got to go out there because, you know, we're screwed if he doesn't do the thing. And he wouldn't answer his phone. He wouldn't anything like that. So I flew to California. I walked into their offices. I sat in their lobby and I said, yeah, I'm here for Rob Liefeld. I'm here to pick up his pages and tell him I'm not leaving until I get all 10 of them.
That's hilarious.
You know? And so I sat there, went back to my hotel room at night. You know, and one by one, they started trickling in, one a day. I'd take them back and I'd ink it. And then that morning, I'd FedEx it to Valiant. And I did that for 10 days.
Oh, my gosh.
While somebody else was running my company.
That was hilarious.
It was the writing on the wall that this was a disaster from Boo, right? It was a bad idea that should never have been done. But the other thing, too, was the whole speculator boom, as we were talking about, you know, we had a standard policy that we would never print more than 500,000 books. Because I said after John Hart's analysis in the market, we realized there were only about 500,000 readers out there, actual collectors and readers. The rest of them were pretty much speculator stuff. I said, if we're just pumping books after, you know, so we have to draw the line somewhere rather than just, you know, do all this stuff. And for the longest time, they held the line on that. You know, we never printed more than 500,000 books. And then Turok came along.
Woo!
1.7 million.
Well, I think Jason owns like 500,000 copies of that one.
Right,
Only
well,
232.
Yeah. Well, that's the straw that broke the camel's back, kind of, right? Because to quote Gordon Gekko, "Greed's a bitch," because I got voted down. They just like, no, we're going to do it, and the money for that. For instance, Jorge Gonzalez, who was the colorist on that, his one royalty check from that for doing the coloring, which we paid royalties to colorists, believe it or not, because I believe they're artists, was somewhere close to $18,000.
Wow.
One guy involved bought a house, paid cash. Yeah, from the one issue. Yeah. But at the same time, that's when people started getting really worried. Like, okay, am I stuck with these things for the rest of my life?
Yep.
But the history proved me right. The market couldn't support it. Comics are like stock market, right?
Yeah.
It's like collectability goes on customers' belief. That's why when you have stuff CGC'd, you do that with the belief that CGCing it will make it more valuable, because it's forever encased in plastic or whatever like that. It's a public perception, right? The second people start dumping these books for pennies on the dollars, and Turok was only one example. I mean, the worst example, of course, was Death of Superman.
All right.
All right. Yeah. Like 7 million copies.
Ridiculous.
But that was the beginning of the end for the comic industry.
Or X-Men #1. I mean, that hit 8.2 million. Yeah.
So we did our fair share, but although I'm jumping around a bit, Turok was a great book, though. Don't get me wrong.
I thought so too. It's a great book. How many did #2 sell? Did #2 just totally dump after #1 sold 1?
I don't remember exactly whatever, but yeah, the point of it is everything became a slow, steady decline after that. For the whole industry, though. But I used to tell the knobs when we'd have our Wednesday meetings or whatever, because sometimes I would have to. These kids were just out of Cuber school or whatever. I mean, I remember doing one particular meeting where I had to teach them how to balance a checkbook because none of them had ever had money in their life.
Wow.
I mean, simple stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
That was teaching these kids, day to day how to survive in life, right? So it was weird when the money started coming in and people like lost their minds. I said, don't go out and buy laser discs and stuff like that because they're going to be, put your money aside. Wait, because this is not going to last. I said, it never has. And we've seen these booms and busts all the time. And just like the stock market, sooner or later, the bottom's going to follow this. So don't go out and blow your money on a bunch of useless stuff. And like Sean Chin paid attention to that, and he banked almost everything he made. Wound up buying an apartment in New York for like $2 million or something. And selling it for twice that. Or like some of them were smart, some of them weren't, but
yeah, I know we covered a lot. I mean, Valiant wise, I think we covered most of Valiant. But I know one thing you mentioned earlier is you want to talk a little bit about Bad Egg. So from when Valiant was sold to Bad Egg, like what was that journey? Fill in the blank for us.
Well, again, we had. Can I just cut to the chase on this?
Yeah.
All right. My ex-wife Jill, who I'm still really close friends with. Okay. As you know, when I come to Florida, I stay with her and her husband now. Okay. Yeah. I mean, Jill and I wrote this book for Jill because she loved poop and dick jokes. She was always a sucker for them. And I literally did this book because they said we had come up with a couple of new titles. And I said, well, we don't have a humor book. Let's do a humor. So I said, right around the time of Jurassic Park, right? All the hype on that. And I said, well, let's do a kind of a parody comic with there's William Shatner. I love that.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. That's Kurunos. Yes. Yeah. Which I named him after Paris Kurunos, one of the few guys I had to fire from the company. for behavioral problems. But
no.
Anyway, the whole idea of this was, I mean, I had a blast because it was part political humor, part comic book parody. My favorite one was this. How to steal this book. Get this absolutely free, and it tells you how to shoplift it from a comic shop on the cover.
That's awesome, dude.
I know.
Red distract fucking comic, dude. That's so cool.
I know. It's just I was just trying to basically push the envelope. Do you have the cover? I think the cover to 3.
Oh, yeah, let's keep going.
There was 2 series. I did one, and it was popular enough that I did a second one.
Oh my god!
It didn't sell great. It had a large, deeply disturbed following. Okay.
Oh dear.
That's
that was the tapeworm episode. Yeah, I tell it all from a tapeworm's point of view inside the. No, this is the second series, right?
Oh, second series. I don't know. Number 3. There's number 3 or 4.
No one can hear you scream, fart, poop. Hang on a second. This is my agent Spencer Beck.
Yeah, go for it. I love that. Do a live call. Put them on speaker.
I do that. Hi, Bubba. You caught me in the middle of a live broadcast. I'm doing a podcast with the Valiant guys, and we're hearing. Say hi to everybody.
Hey, Spence. How's it going?
Okay, how you guys doing?
We're good. We're live on Valiant TLDR. So, what's your biggest, most memorable moment of Bob's career as his representation?
The time he was taken out in handcuffs and arrested for trafficking in comic book artwork.
Were they hidden in dinosaur eggs? That's the other question.
Honestly, the best moment I ever had is when I met Bob at Valiant, of all things. I had known Bob for about 2 or 3 years, but we hadn't met. And then I happened to go in with an inker named Steve Montano. I went into the office, and Bob was there with his mullet.
It's a ponytail.
It looked like a mullet.
It was a ponytail.
That's what they happy to say. Anyhow, but he walked over, he looked at Steve's artwork and said, "This is really nice." And just without even thinking, he said, "Who are you?" Just looking very nonchalantly, smiling.
That's a fair question.
And I said, "I'm Spencer," and he went, "Oh, hi. We've never met." Then we started from there. We had talked, but we had never physically met.
Okay, that was brilliant. Thank you. I'll call you when I'm done.
Awesome. We got 2 interviews in one. So, Bob, I know we're approaching our 2-hour mark, and
well, I have to go. What's that?
I tease you about this. You made a boo-boo.
Okay.
we made $1 million deal for you.
I know.
All right.
Do your podcast.
All right, Bubba. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bob, we got a couple of last questions for you. So, to kind of close up the Valiant chapter, was there any lost stories? Was there any major Valiant storyline that never saw the light of day?
Yes.
Do tell.
Okay.
Chomchi.
We'll save that for another one. So with that said, I mean, what's now and what's in the future? I mean, we're here now. BobLayton.com. Man, so much of your
you heard about me getting thrown off Facebook, right?
No, we have not heard of that.
Yeah, I know your account got locked out or something.
No, they said that because of identity authenticity, that I wasn't me, that I was obviously a bot or something, and they threw me off in November, and I haven't been able to get back on. I am permanently banned. I tried to start a new page, and they banned that 4 days later.
Jesus.
Yeah, so I am 20 years of memories and photos and everything all gone. So
Bob, let's offline this.
I've been off Facebook. Well, and also it was a source of revenue in terms of getting commissions and stuff. But
let me make some calls for you. Let me make some calls for you after this.
Well, no, I'm saying I'm fine. It's not like I need the money. I do the commissions because I like. Oh, yay, Sean!
Sean Chen in the building.
Sean, I love you. So thank you.
Hey, Sean.
Yeah, it's not that I need the money or anything. I'm fine, financially or whatever. I mean, I live in Korea. It was part of my retirement plan because life here is really cheap. I mean, it's crazy what I can live for here comfortably,
Yeah. So why Korea? Why are you retiring Korea?
Well, of all the places I visited, when I took off on my world tour after COVID, I went around the world. I went to every country that I never got invited to a con for. So I went to like 13. I did a count the other night. I did 13 countries, since I left, and I spent a month in each one. What I love about here, besides the cost of living being incredibly cheap compared, I mean, I have a really decent modern apartment here, studio, living room, washer, dryer, bedroom, all this stuff. I paid $900 a month for it.
It's amazing.
In a modern building, right in the heart of the city. I mean, it's like you can't rent storage space in the United States for that, right? The food costs, all that sort of thing. Plus, I can travel all over Asia from here, and it's like commuter flights. I've already been to Japan twice. I've been to Taiwan. I went to St. Bernard, Taiwan. I went to the Philippines. I've been to Thailand. So I'm using this as kind of a base. So yeah, but so I keep busy. I like you said, according to the CAF guys, I had the second most commissions of anybody at CAF at the OAX.
Yep.
Sure.
So yeah, I always have that deeply disturbed following that wants stuff from me. That's good. like you guys. But also, I do covers from time to time when something comes up and it looks good. Like I do some stuff for Nikki. Like I did a Terminator cover for him a couple months ago.
Oh yeah, that one was awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I had a blast doing that, right? And I donated all the money I do for Nikki to Policeman's Charity.
Yeah, Daryl's. Yeah,
I don't even take money for this stuff. I make enough of the sale of the original art that I don't really need the money. So I had cheap Nikki's cheap rates. So I said, give it to a charity that matters more. But easier on my books keeping that way too. So. I don't even keep the money, and everything I do here in Korea, drink and draw and stuff, it's all for charity as well.
That's awesome.
I made sure before I left that I was like financially sound, so I could. I pretty much if I do anything, I do it because I want to.
That's great. Man, live the dream life.
I have no interest in doing comics anymore. It's just that's a young person's job. It's way too much work for not enough money. But I realized during COVID. I felt like a war profiteer because I made more money in the 2 years of COVID than I ever did going to cons. Wow. It's like, and I'm like, I was just banking all that. I said, I'm just going to bank that for the Bob Layton World Tour, right? As soon as this is over, I'm hitting the road and I'm going to go to all the places I wanted to always see and never got invited to or whatever. And so I went off to Greece and to Spain and to Poland. I went to France. I went, to Lyon, France. I went to Copenhagen. I came to Korea. And here's the thing about Korea, Carl, you were asking me. During the salad days at Marvel, when I was doing Iron Man and the Champions and stuff like that, the early stuff, I lived down in Soho before Soho became all snooty and everything.
Yeah.
When it was all hippies and it smelled like patchouli and everything. This reminds me of being back in old New York because you have to walk everywhere. Yeah. When I go out shopping today, I'll go to the vegetable market. There's no supermarkets. I'll go to the vegetable guy, and so the vegetable guy knows me. I'll buy my veggies there. Then I'll stop at the side store where the women all they do is make Korean sides, and I'll get like all these little side stuff. And I know them. Yeah. I know all the ladies at the CU down here that is like the 7-Eleven convenience store. I know them all by their first names. There's that sense of community, local community. People recognize you, and it's like you have to walk. You have to make an effort to do things, and it reminds me of being back in old New York, which I really kind of like, Yeah. So, I wasn't really cut out for the suburbs. So living, in Brandon, Florida really was not conducive to me. I'm a city boy, I always have been, so that's why I like it here.
Yeah.
So I decided to come back after I did my world tour. I decided to come back and stay.
Congratulations.
So, I have two new students. This kid OG and this woman Joanne Kim, and Joanne Kim is going to be a superstar. She's going to be. I'm telling you, she was the third person ever to walk up to the camera. Okay?
Wow.
Amazing artist. I'm working with her, and Spencer is representing her to try to get her work in the States.
That's
so
awesome.
it's like, so I spend my time here now developing talent. Trying to give back a little bit. And raising money for local charities here. That's pretty much what I do. And the occasional commission.
Yep.
Living the good life, man. Bob, no, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a amazing.
It went by a lot faster than I thought it would.
Yeah, no. I mean, I wish we had 2 more hours, honestly.
Well, thank you for respecting it, because there's always been 2 schools on Valiant. I'll end it this way. That Jim created everything, and I came in and usurped it all, right? Or then the other one that things got mucked up really bad. There was a shakeup, and boom, I took over, and things started making money. It's like, yeah,
You did. You made a lot of money. Yeah.
yeah, no, and it's like, because everybody had to kind of play to his ego, unfortunately, which is very common in this business, and he wasn't the guy I remembered. That's the problem, and I don't hold anything against Jim personally. Okay, well, actually I do, but that's beside the point. The point is, it's like he was a great writer. He wasn't a very good manager or businessman, and so that's why the place was kind of a hot mess for a while. And like I said, fortunately, with Fred's help, we kind of got the ship righted, and things for a long time went really, really well. So, it was one of the best times. To give you a prime example, there was Sean Chen that just shows up, right?
Amazing.
It's like, but I'm telling you, it's like there's a bond between all of us that can't be broken. And it's like, it's really a wonderful thing. And, it's one of the highlights of my life. And it was really fun to share it with all you guys.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a highlight.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
We really appreciate it. We were very intentional for you to be our first guest. So
okay, well, call me back in 20 years. I'll see if I have any more stories for you.
All right. So, thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. This is Carl Choi, SCG, as well as Stingray, and the legendary Bob Layton signing off tonight. Thank you, Bob. Stay on.
Korean wave.
Don't hang up yet, because we're going to upload the stream. So, everyone else,
all right.
Good night.